And then I brush and brush and brush and brush my hair. Which is not getting more untangled than this, to be honest. It feels like having a hat over your ears, though. How do the drag queens keep the ears out? February has become an interesting month in these last couple of years, but starting with a proper list of things, sort of. Let's go to the most important one. It happens to be my birthday in February, and it's still a week or 10 days away, so don't worry about that. But the thing is, I received my first gift, which might possibly explain to you why I'm wearing this at the moment. Which is one of my passions, and I'm so glad that somebody picked on it. And it's Rapunzel from Tangled with Pascal. I like how Pascal goes all black-eyed, just like the Funko Pop style. And yeah, my mother-in-law got it for me under suggestion of Rob, because Rob pays attention to a lot of things, despite how much he says that he doesn't like Tangled. And actually, after getting this, I got tempted to watch Tangled again. I watched Tangled again, which I hadn't watched in a couple of years now, I would say. Sorry, Pascal. And I always knew that I liked Tangled in a very special way. I always thought that it was somewhat my favorite Disney, although I couldn't quite pinpoint why. I suppose it was, I always thought that it was because, hello, Whisker, that it was because of the very different register that it has. So it has sort of a comedic register rather than just a musical. Flynn is a very peculiar character, and the evolution between in the relationship between Rapunzel and Eugene is very interesting. But also, and I remember this, referring to the very peculiar characteristic that Mother Gothel has as a villain, because I found it at the time questionable but intriguing, the fact that the villain was an adoptive mother, but regardless of what she has done, she still raised Rapunzel for 18 years. So I thought it was quite controversial to make a villain like that. But also it felt like it hit quite close to home, and I could never quite tell why. Well,
everything I did was to protect you.
If you remember, last year, to the day actually, I made a video that was the last video of my Italian ginger diary, when last year I went home for, well, I hoped a month, but then it was reduced to 21 days, to try and sort, I thought I was trying and sort my mother's health out. It turned out to be much more complicated than that. But yeah, if you go here, you will see the last day of the Italian diary, which basically sums it all up and explains, to the level that I knew and understood and felt last year, what happened, basically. A lot of things that happened during the last year, and that I had to learn to name and cope with. And basically, watching Tangled yesterday made me realize that that is probably why I felt so close to the peculiar way that it goes on, and the story that it depicts, and the questionable but interesting way that it picked a villain, which is Mother Gothel. And that's because pretty much Tangled tends to be a quite accurate depiction of my first 18 years of life. Now, I know that it might sound very exaggerated and dramatic because I wasn't locked in a tower, but the interesting point is, that's right, that Rapunzel technically could have left the tower at any point she wanted to. She didn't for 18 years because her mother told her not to.
You want to go outside? Oh, why, Rapunzel? Look at you, as fragile as a flower. Still a little sapling, just a sprout. You know why we stay up in this tower?
I know,
That's right, to keep you safe and sound, yeah.
despite of how much she wanted to. And that's very, very similar to my entire upbringing, basically. I was kept, I come from technically a single mother environment, but I was raised, thank God, by my maternal grandparents. I didn't quite go to kindergarten. I did my first year of school privately at home. I sort of went to public school up until I was 12, so 6 to 12. But then after that, I was put into private education again. Not a private school, but having a private tutor coming home, basically, and then doing everything that way. There is a characteristic about that kind of psychological prison, I would say, that more than a prison, it comes to you as the infamous golden cage. So when it's all so golden and nice inside, you don't quite realize that there is any kind of bar, really, that it's very intensely keeping you away from everything that is outside. So if I try to go more specific, I might want to explain to you what happened in the last year, because there are a lot of realizations that came to me. The first video I made about this subject, I think, was when I made the video about being raised by narcissists, which you can find here. However, at the time, I don't think I was quite ready to bring my own story and my own experience in it. So I hope I delivered the concept and the ideas, but because they weren't necessarily endorsed by a personal story and example, they might have. That's the problem of lacking examples. That's why I think Tangled is, in its innocence, such a great way to depict it.
Rapunzel, look in that mirror. You know what I see? I see a strong, confident, beautiful young lady. Oh, look, you're here too.
Because just saying things or just talking about how bad or selfish a parent can be doesn't quite deliver, because we're all taught that that's not what parents do. So until you actually see an example, you can't quite wrap your head around it, can you? So what happened last year was I decided to take a month out of my life, and I was going back thinking that I was helping my mother's health. The thing I realized being there is that it was for the first time in my 32 years of life at the time that some things happened. Specifically, it was the first time that I actually went against my mother. Technically, it's not the very, very first time. The very, very first time was when I tried, when I was 18, to move out, so to get out of my tower. And my mother tried everything, every kind of moral blackmail, any kind of guilt trip. She tried it on me.
Stop no more, you'll just upset me.
I don't know why at the time, I just felt like, no, I know that this is right, though. People do leave home and do go studying and everything, so that can't be as bad as she makes me sound if I do it. But yeah, she had this thing about making me sound like I was this awful, terrible daughter that she would have even thought about bringing her flowers on the grave the moment that abandoning her would have brought her to an early grave. So we were at that situation. But I left, and that brought my mother not to quite speak to me for 4 years at the time, so up until I was around 22. So you'd think I would have caught something there already, but not quite. Not to the level that I did last year, because last year it was the first time that I wasn't just given the option to withdraw myself from the situation like it was when I moved out, but I actually stood up against her in a very present way.
No! You were wrong about the world.
The problem, which I briefly explained into the last video diary, was that for a very long time, because I was so used to what she showed me being the normal, I never questioned it. Until, again, being there again after 15 years that I had left, brought back some sort of realizations. And one of those was the infamous one that I explained in that video, that I never necessarily was taught the use of a wardrobe. So I thought that I was going back to help my mother's health, but in truth, I should have known, but I wasn't able to put it out in words, that my mother's actual issue at the time was that she was a very serious hoarder. But I realized that not even to people that were really close to me, I brought myself to explain that, because I was taught for a very long time that you don't air the dirty laundry. However, at the same time, I was always taught to never lie, and to always be open and to not hide things. However, these were very strongly addressed to my mother herself. So my mother was teaching me this stuff so that I would do it with her. But at the same time, she was telling me not to do it with other people. So this kind of conflict never quite resolved for me. So even the moment that I presented myself there last year, and I was so open. I suppose that's why I wanted to be so open, that I even wanted to do a daily vlog diary. At the time, it was because if anyone is in a situation with a dear person that's close to them, a parent, and at the time I was thinking about diabetes and bad eating mainly, well, then it might be useful to them for me to document what I'm doing, and maybe they can apply to their own situation and maybe it can help. And in fact, if you notice, it took me, I think, 4 or 5 days to actually come to the admission of, well, there's this part that I've skipped on, but that I've glossed over, but it's quite crucial. And the fact is, my mother is a hoarder, a very serious one. She's been hoarding since I can remember. Again, to the point that I never knew what a wardrobe was for and what putting things in order in neat places was like until I had my own room. And I don't know why at that point I just became obsessed with keeping things neat and clean and properly ordered. I suppose it was a reaction. So while in that month I tried to go there, I had to cut it short because for the first time in my life, I saw my mother turning into a person I had no idea she could be. She became it's not even angry, but she became vicious towards me.
You want me to be the bad guy? Fine. Now I'm the bad guy.
The last drop was her coming into my room at night, screaming at me and telling me that she was screaming at me and she was calling me names, which is something that she always taught me she would do only when I really deserved it. So it was also quite very intimidating when she did that. But that night, I tried to ignore it. I tried to pretend I was still asleep anyway. And at some point she said, oh yeah, you keep on sleeping. Sleep well now, because you don't know if you're going to wake up tomorrow. And when you hear something like that coming from your own mother, which you've always idolized as sort of a saint, because she always protected you and she always did everything for your own good, like pretty much Mother Gothel, doesn't she? All she did was to protect Rapunzel.
Mother knows best.
Or her hair, because it was useful to her. Well, anyway. Yeah, that was the moment where I realized I had to give up the idea that my mother would have always been there to protect me from everything, including herself, because no, there would have been something more important to her, and that would have been the stuff she wanted over me. So having come to realization to that's why my trip was cut short of 9 days. Because at that point, even the people that I was talking to, like I was talking to social services, I was talking to psychologists, I was talking to doctors, I was talking to my friends, of course, to Rob. Everybody was too worried about me. And hearing these people that I trust so much being so worried about me, spending days and nights in that house with that person, I was like, okay, I didn't realize it before, but maybe it's something that I need to give a little bit of thought as well. I left, I came back to London, and the moment I came back to London, a lot of realizations came to me about my entire childhood, actually, and things that were going on that weren't necessarily clear or clean, actually. And without going too much into detail, a history of sexual molestation came up, basically, with my mother that I had never realized was that. That took me a moment to distance myself, to be honest, because, well, again, picture the situation. You are 30-something years old. You have only one parent, which is your mother, that you idolize, and you've always been told by everyone, especially her, that she is a saint, that she lives for you, and you should be the most grateful because there's not a better mother in the world. And then you realize that the way that she was showing you affection was actually her way to get some sort of weird ownership / satisfaction herself with you and your body as well. So it's not necessarily something that is easy to swallow. I tried to calm down at the time. Thankfully, I was starting cognitive behavioral therapy for other reasons, so that helped, and I'm still in that. First thing that I would feel like saying to anyone that feels weird about anything that is happening, speak to someone, because unfortunately what we are taught as children is very natural for us to be taken as normal. I suppose as much as Rapunzel was dreaming about how the grass and dirt would feel under her feet, she genuinely felt weirded out when she touched them as well, because up until that point she had just experienced the stone walls and the stone around the tower. So it might feel intriguing, but it definitely doesn't feel normal. So what you've been taught in the first years of your life, that's unfortunately what feels normal, regardless of the fact that it can be right and it can be wrong. Unfortunately, at the moment, the battle is still ongoing with my mother, because when all these things came to me, the thing that I tried to do was to save what was still possible to save. I personally didn't feel like any kind of relationship was salvageable, but there was a lot of legacy from my grandparents that was extremely important to me, because again, as briefly mentioned before, they're the one who raised me. And looking back now with the help of doctors, psychologists and other people, I can see how clearly they knew something was not necessarily right with my mother, and they tried to protect me from her the best they could up until they were alive. Unfortunately, my grandmother died when I was 12 and my grandfather died when I was 8, so after that, I was left fencing for myself in a battle that I didn't know was going on, so not necessarily the best of ways. But yeah, the most important thing to me was like, how do I salvage all of these? So the last year, it's been basically my full-time job to sort up all the mess, basically, that my mother has done with my grandparents' legacy. But anyway, yeah, there is a current battle that is going on that I can't quite fight openly, because it took me time to realize any kind of closure or resolution that I might find useful to deal with all these things will never come from my mother. My mother will never admit that she has done anything wrong.
Rapunzel, you know I hate leaving you after a fight, especially when I've done absolutely nothing wrong.
To me or to anything that she's done in the last 20 years. So that's not something that I can aim for, and I'm okay with it. The only thing that I can do is save what, again, is still salvageable. But anyway, it's something I'm working on, but of course, you know, the only thing that I'm still fighting with is that as much as I know that this is something that I need to do, that my grandparents would have supported me to, that clearly they tried to do at the time when they had the time, being still around me, there is one tiny little piece that doesn't quite fit in the rest, which is every time that I do something that I know my mother won't approve and she will be mad at me or she will scream at me. And the bad part is I feel sort of guilty about that, because how good a person can you possibly be if you don't respect the authority of your elders and especially of your parents?
I am a despicable human being.
The thing is, though, and this is the one important thing that I hope to give enough out to the world for people to think about it. No, as much as it's been taught that it sounds like a good thing, your elders do not naturally gain and deserve respect just because they've been born before you. It does come from their actions, it does come from their values, and it has to come from the people they are rather than the age they carry on their shoulders. And it is an hard thing for me, but I think I am coming in a harsher way than one should to the realization that, yeah, parents are just people, and sometimes they are actually not good people. And at the very least, you have to be able to protect yourself. If you're wondering why I'm putting this out there, unpleasant as it probably might sound, the reason is the moment I started to realize that something was wrong in the way that I thought that things were right, in the way that I was brought up and I was living my mother-daughter relationship, is because I heard and read of other people's experiences and how people thought and reacted about them, especially on the subreddit for Raised by Narcissists. And I think this is the same. I think if any of these struck too close to things that you are experiencing or seeing, then basically, yeah, you should consider, you should question, and you should, more than anything, you should never doubt the fact that you're not just a daughter, a son, you're a person yourself, and there are things, basic things that you deserve because of that, and nobody has an automatic right to do shit to you, basically, just because they're your elders or they are a figure of authority towards you or they are a parent or whatever. So yeah, what I'm trying to say, I suppose, is if anything sounds familiar, please do reach out to people. Feel free to reach out to me if you want to just even talk. And yeah, you never talk enough. You never speak up enough. I know that the first thing you will be told will be not to air your dirty laundry in public. But as soon as something like that is told to you, there's something off. Because if you can't go out with your head high and be able, if you do something, you should be able to talk about that something. And if you're forbidden to, then there's something wrong. I hope I didn't make this too heavy. I tried the best that I could to keep something funny about it. But I know that it's not an easy subject, and I know that I haven't lived easily with it. But I'm also I think I'm also building the best life that I possibly can with this background, and not necessarily because I have this background, my life from here onwards is in any level doomed or tainted by it. And I don't want it to. And I know that awareness is important in that sense. So here we go. This is my story in how Tangled and Rapunzel can actually seep through reality in different ways. If I can do anything and you feel like talking to me, you will find all my contacts down here. And if you feel like anything at all is sort of not quite completely right in your life right now, talk to someone. Talk to people at work. Just go to your doctor and have a chat. You don't have to go to the doctor just when you are actually bleeding, but there are bleeds inside that needs attention to. Otherwise, we are left with very little of ourselves to keep on being there.